Hi, this is Mrs. Roberts, and we are doing 9.4 today for AP Psychology. Number one, blank is the process by which we evaluate and modify our emotional reactions, whereas blank is a biologically based general style of reacting emotionally and behaviorally to the environment. Okay, so these are fill in the blanks, which means that they're generally just testing your definitions. So, do you know the definition of these two items? So, what are our kind of clues here? So, our first one is a process, and then our second is a biologically based something, right? So, and it's also testing your definition. So, the two definitions that we were asked about during this first part of the 9.4 homework were emotion regulation and temperament, right? So, that leads us to either B or E. So, we've got to figure out which one of these two is correct. So, is emotion regulation, is that going to be a process, or is temperament a process? So, if we just use our powers of logic, we probably know that emotion regulation sounds more like a process. And in fact, that's true. Emotion regulation in small, like children, infants, you maybe suck their pacifier if they're feeling upset, or they might turn their head away to kind of, separate themselves from what they're seeing. If you're a teenager, you're heartbroken, you might go into your room and watch your favorite movie or favorite show and try to regulate yourself so that you can kind of get back into a social situation. That's emotion regulation. Temperament's different. According to psychologists, and this has been done multiple studies in the 50s and the 70s and the 80s, and most recently in the 2000s, basically tried to study if who you were when you were an infant was the same person as who you were whenever you were a child and eventually an adult. So a lot of psychologists did some longitudinal studies. One of the more famous ones was from Thomas and Chess, and also highly criticized. So they had parents determine what kind of child they had, and I think that was the major issue with the study. They didn't have a researcher determine what kind of child they were, like what temperament they had. This study was kind of later proven to be more inconclusive. And then we have another study that was done by Jerome Kagan, several studies about the nature of the child or the temperament of the child. And this study proved also that unless you were like very, very inhibited, that you didn't like people, or you were really extremely uninhibited, that you were really like, trying to entertain people, there really wasn't too much of a difference between, or there wasn't any connection with who you were as an infant into who you were as a child. And they interviewed them all the way through about 7.5 years old. So in this case, since we know, emotional regulation or emotion regulation is up here a process, we also know temperament is this biologically based general style of reacting emotionally and behaviorally. Does it start when you're an infant? Questionable. Is it really biologically based? Still is not proved. Number two, which developmental stage theory explained how experiences in infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and old age influence later personality characteristics? All right, so for your homework, you were asked to study about Erikson, Harlow, and Ainsworth. You already know about Piaget. We know that he had 4 stages, so we can definitely take that out. And so this one already is telling us more than 4 is what I mean by that. And then Kohlberg, someone you're going to learn about later, he also only has 4 stages there. So we go back to Erikson, Harlow, Ainsworth. If we just remember who Erikson is, he's the one who's talking about stages. Harlow later does like a monkey experiment. That really doesn't have to do with stages. And then Ainsworth, all her studies are about social attachment, not stages. So we'll go to Erikson, D. If we go back to the interwebs, these are the basic conflicts that Erikson says that we go through in our lives. We're going to do a lot of work with this during class, so I'm not going to go over this too much. Just point out to you guys that you all are in identity versus role confusion. So your important events are cultivating social relationships. Erikson would say that you need to develop a sense of self and a personal identity. And if you're successful, you can stay true to yourself. But if you fail, you're going to have some role confusion and a weak sense of yourself. He doesn't mean that this is like an ultimate failure forever. You can revisit these. It just means that we really can't move on to this next conflict until you resolve this one. All right, number 3, in an old Tom and Jerry cartoon, the woodpecker egg rolls into Jerry's home and hatches. Because Jerry is the first animal the woodpecker sees, it yells, "Mama!" and flings itself into Jerry's arms. As Jerry and the little woodpecker spend more time together, they form a true emotional bond, which is also referred to as blank. All right, I asked you to learn about two different things, imprinting and attachment. So it's really important that you remember what imprinting is. Now, unfortunately, for those of us who are living in these times, we already know the word imprinting. So imprinting here in reference to the Twilight Saga. That's not the kind of imprinting we're talking about. We also might have known about it from genomic imprinting. The kind of imprinting we're talking about, we're going to have to type in psychology. And then even then, that's really not helpful because the type of imprinting we talked about here is really in reference to a specific study by Konrad Lorenz. So you'll see it just autofills, the geese experiments. And we'll just go to images here so you guys can see. So he just decided to determine, would geese imprint on him? Was there a sudden biologically primed form of attachment? He found yes. He found that they actually imprinted on him, so much so his evidence would be that they would bring him worms and place them in his ear. They would follow him around. So that's what imprinting is a sudden biological moment. Now, attachment is going to be a little bit longer period of time. This is what human children go through. So the strong emotional bond that develops between children and primary caregivers, and it takes a little longer to develop. So in this case, we notice that it says they form a true emotional bond, and this spends more time together. So we're going to go with attachment here. All right, number 4, fill in the blanks with the appropriate term. Blank anxiety, distress over contact with unfamiliar people, often emerges around age 6 or 7 months and ends by age 18 months. Blank anxiety, distress over being separated from a primary caregiver, typically begins a little later and appears around age 12 to 16 months, and it disappears between 2 and 3 years of age. All right, so I asked you to learn about stranger anxiety and separation anxiety, right? So those are those two. Those are really the only ones that make sense here. Now we've got to figure out which one goes where. So pretty simply, obviously we don't have to figure out which one goes where because we have stranger here and then separation here. But just to point out, stranger, unfamiliar people, separation, separated. So if you weren't sure about these other 3 choices, you could definitely fill in the blank and just sort of make those connections. All right, number 5, Harlow's monkey experiment illustrated blank. All right, you guys were to learn a little bit about Harry Harlow and his monkey experiment. So I typed in Harlow, Harry, monkey, and just looked at the images just to show you guys what that was. So in your reading, you read about his experiments with monkeys. He would give them the option between seeing this right here. So this is a wire mother is what he called it. And then this was sort of the I can't remember what exactly he called this. The cloth mother. There we are. Help. Thank you, Google. So every time the monkey ended up preferring the cloth mother, and then he did further experiments where he only paired them with a wire mother, and then he only paired them with a cloth mother. And he found all kinds of evidence of problems that basically happened as being raised by a wire mother versus the cloth mother. So ones with the wire mother, he saw that they were more stressed and frightened than monkeys who were raised with real mothers. And even whenever this nourishing or cloth mother, they basically maintained contact with this cloth mother throughout the experiment. You can see here where they're kind of hugging the cloth mother. I have one of these in my room. If you're wondering what that weird wire thing was on the wall, now you know. So what does all that tell us? So what's our best choice? Is it importance of physical contact? Is it uniquely human language? Is it about primates? It is about primates. Is it about them using tools? No. The danger of separating babies from their natural parents? It's possible. Wire mothers, cloth mothers, shyness is highly inheritable. Okay, so what our best bet here is going to be A, the importance of physical contact. All right, number 6, Mary Ainsworth placed babies into a strange situation, observed the baby's reaction when the parents left and returned. What is she studying? She's studying how attached they are to their parents. And then number 7, after finishing work on a big English project, Andrew's room is a mess. His parents are furious without letting him explain. They prohibit him from using his car. What kind of parents are they? They're going to be authoritarian.